Hi, my name's Scott Junker, and we're going to replace the bearings in some Easton M1 hubs. Alright, I'm going to start with the front hub. I'm going to go a little slower than normal so you guys can follow along. This is a really easy hub to replace the bearings in. First we're going to stick a 5mm Allen in each end of the axle. And crack that loose. And once that drive side end cap pops off, we're left with the adjuster and the axle inside the hub. We can just push it out and pull the axle straight out. There are a couple of seals on each bearing, and pull those out. And now we can tap the bearings out. We're going to use this Woodruff key, or half moon key, so we can push the bearing out evenly and straight. And just a basic punch. So just so you can see what I was doing inside the hub shell there, I'm going to use this half moon key, or Woodruff key. I'm going to slide it up inside the bearing, and then it's going to rest on the bearing so that when I'm using the punch to drive the bearing out of the hub shell, I can hit just like that and it drives it straight out instead and doesn't damage the hub shell while you're driving the bearing out. Same thing on the other side. Now we're ready to put some new bearings in. When we're putting a bearing into a hub, we want to make sure that we're going to push it in perfectly straight and that we're supporting all the necessary races when we're pushing it in. So I'm going to use the axle and drift number 17. I'm going to slide the drift all the way on, and that's going to support the bearing as we're pushing it into the hub shell to make sure that we don't damage either the hub shell or the bearing, and that the bearing goes in perfectly straight. We're going to push the rotor side bearing in first. So that's going to stay just like that. And we use drift 16 on the other side to keep the axle straight inside the hub shell. There's one side that has a recess and one side that has a flat. We're going to use the flat side to the inside on this hub. In order to push this thing in, we're going to use a quick release here as our bearing press. I'm going to put a washer on that side. And on this side we're just going to use the quick release nut. Now as I tighten the quick release, it's going to compress everything and push the bearing into the hub shell. There it goes. Just to make sure. Yep, it's all the way in. And take the quick release back out. I'm going to leave the axle, and the bearing, and the other drift in there. They're in place right now. I'm just going to take out drift 16. Put a new bearing in. Drift 16 goes back on. And QR goes back in. And QR nut. It's all the way in. Now I've got two new bearings in the hub shell. Feel nice and smooth. I'm going to put these seals back in. But before I put the seals back in, I'm going to put just a little bit of grease right on top of the bearing. A little bit of extra protection there. To make sure I get the seals in all the way, I'm going to push them in with our drift. And put the axle back in. We're going to make sure that the fixed side of the axle is always on the rotor side, otherwise the spacing will be off. And on this side we have the adjuster and the end cap. I'm going to thread them together by hand at first. And then we're going to thread that assembly onto the axle. hold on to it. That gets torqued down. And then we can use the a cone wrench on here to make the adjustment. Oops. So there you go, that's how easy it is to change the bearings in an Easton M1 hub. This is a standard size bearing, and it's available through us or through your local bike shop.